Our convention occurs at a moment of crisis for our nation. The attacks on our police and the terrorism of our cities threaten our very way of life. Any politician who does not grasp this danger is not fit to lead our country.
Who do you think that man was talking about? Bill Colley with you this morning. I want to thank Mr. Big Voice for the introduction. Donald J. Trump speaking last night at the Republican National Convention where he accepted his party's nomination, and it was quite an event if you had a chance to see it. There's some argument going on this morning. Some of the pundits are saying, well, you know, it's not exactly, it doesn't rise to the level perhaps of Ronald Reagan and his city on a shining hill or shining city on a hill, or it might not necessarily rise to the cross of gold speech and the like. But a lot of people are saying that for 75 minutes, which is considered long in this day and age when it comes to speechifying, as I once heard it called in an old episode of a radio show that was politically incorrect. We got to hear it when I was a college student. But I happened to be sitting there last night taking all of this in and thinking to myself, this guy is hitting on all of the right notes. And I guess it brings up an interesting question here, and I suppose for a lot of people who are tuning in this morning, if you didn't hear it, you're getting a lot of your detail this morning from folks in mainstream media. And here's the thing. They first tried that tack. Well, it was too long. Ha ha. Donald Trump doesn't know how to be brief. Ha ha. I'm going to go rub myself. That's what they were telling you in liberal media this morning if you turned on something like MSDNC's Morning Joe. Well, that didn't fly. So now they're saying, this is an actual line from that Morning Joe program today. I decided to see what they were up to after all of this because you got to admit, Hillary Clinton and the fellow travelers, they are having probably unexpected bowel movements this morning after hearing what Mr. Trump had to say last night. So now they're saying, well, it was a dark and dystopian speech. Michael Steele, who was the former Republican chairman and national chairman, we should point out, and a one-time lieutenant governor of Maryland, which is rare in that state to have a Republican in that role, he said, you know, folks, I had to go look up what dystopian meant. And maybe you're right if you just read the speech, but hearing it delivered by Donald Trump last night was quite thrilling. And I have to agree with that. And this morning, Jeff Greenfield, the uber-liberal reporter who's bounced around from network TV to various writing gigs and the like over the last 35, 40 years, he has a piece at Politico that says Donald Trump is flipping blue-collar workers from Democrat to Republican this year. So for all those so-called gains that Democrats are going to be making when it comes to, the Latino vote, the black vote, the left-handed vote, the fat vote, the short vote. You get it. You know, by dividing people up into segments, Trump may well score a big-time victory here. And this is something that I want to remind you all of. Yes, sometimes people make really long speeches and they leave their audiences catatonic. I have to admit I've gone to church sometimes and there are some deacons who get up and they speak and deliver the homilies and they'll open up with, well, I have a reading here today I wanted to share with you that I think underscores my point from St. Ignatio the Burnt, who was writing in 1543 at the College of Palermo. And 15 minutes later, everybody sitting in that church is basically asleep or they've reached some sort of catatonic state and they are zoned out and they've missed the whole thing. So yes, sometimes brevity is really a good thing in our modern culture. I used to work for a television consultant, and he used to tell us, you can't be just interesting anymore. You have to be compelling, because he said we don't have a monopoly on media anymore. We've got hundreds of cable channels. We've got the internet. We've got video games. We've got disc players. All of these things out there are cutting into our opportunity to get our point across. And unless you have something really compelling, then people aren't going to be there. Well, for 75 minutes last night, Donald Trump was tremendously compelling. And I've got to tell you, that's why I believe, and I found a few other things this week that have led me to believe he is not only going to win this election for president, he's going to end up winning in some surprising places. Trump made a pledge to his audience last night. If you were still up late in the evening to hear this, this was, I think, perhaps one of the best moments. And it was, again, nearly an hour and 15 minutes into the presentation. And we'll take a listen to that pledge in just a moment, but a couple of other things, too, I wanted to share with you. He also addressed issues of refugee resettlement, immigration. He talked about the economy. He talked about trade. All of these things packaged nice and neatly into this presentation. If you were not in front of the television last night, I'll be sharing some of the highlights with you this morning. I'd also like to know your reaction. I think he hit a home run. Perhaps you do too, or perhaps you have a few bones you still would like to pick with all of this. Telephone number 736-0300. Donald Trump speaking last night.
The number of new illegal immigrant families who have crossed the border so far this year already exceeds the entire total from 2015. They are being released by the tens of thousands into our communities with no regard for the impact on public safety or resources.
There you go. And that would continually break out during the evening. Either build the wall or chants of USA, USA, USA. Trump even joining in sometimes with the chanting that was going on while he was speaking from the main stage. He also addressed refugee resettlement, which has been, of course, an issue near and dear to many of us in the Magic Valley over the last year and a half at least.
My opponent has called for a radical 550% increase in Syrian. Think of this. This is not believable, but this is what's happening. A 550% increase in Syrian refugees on top of the existing massive refugee flows coming into our country already under the leadership of President Obama. She proposes this despite the fact that there's no way to screen these refugees in order to find out who they are or where they come from. I only want to admit individuals into our country who will support our values and love our people.
I don't know about you, but I got the impression Mr. Trump's audience was liking what they happened to hear at that point. Byron York, who is a writer for the Washington Examiner and one of the talking heads on Fox News, was saying this morning, as people were leaving the convention hall, and he realizes they're going to be biased, they're Republicans, but not all of them in the beginning were Trump supporters, but he listed the first 20 responses he had from people as they were leaving the hall, and they were, my friends, energized. And the things they had to say, and they were making comparisons to Milquetoast Mitt 4 years ago, and some of the other candidates the Republican Party has thrown out in recent memory. And people are just astounded that someone is so bold and is willing to say these things. And he was saying that loudest round of applause, it was deafening when the Code Pink protester interrupted Mr. Trump, and the police were leading this woman out. And he made a comment about what a wonderful job the police were doing and praised the police in Cleveland, that the place just went bonkers. Opened into a long, sustained period of applause. A tremendous ovation. These are things unexpected by folks in the mainstream media. And today, I think they're having to come to grips with how the American people are actually reacting to this, because we're not following the details or the instructions that they are telling us we need to follow. It's 8:16, it's 70. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. 736-0300, the telephone number, Our first caller joins us. You're on air.
Yes, Bill. A couple quick things. Frank's Lump's focus group. One of the gentlemen in there says, "I'm a never Trumper." He says that was the best speech I've ever heard, and he said, "I am in with Trump," and so that is how I felt at times last night, because of things you want to hear somebody saying something that makes some sense. And this may sound funny, but I don't care. I wept because I worry for my country. We need to do exactly what he says we're doing. I cannot believe that he's standing there looking at us and lying. So I believe it. He wrote the speech. The gentleman that helped him write it says, no, he's the one who said everything that was going to do it. He wrote his own speech just like Ronald Reagan used to do. And then also I have it on good authority that is the other best speeches were his children's speeches, and they wrote their speeches. You see, I just hope upon hope that this is something that will happen and he will be elected, and the things he said he was going to do, he can get done, because really we are on the precipice. Thanks, Bill. See ya.
Hey, thank you much for the phone call. And he made that point last night, too. We don't have any time left to waste. I mean, this country now, the number came out the other day, officially is $19.4 trillion in debt. It's an obscenity. That's officially. That doesn't count unfunded liabilities, pension promises, and the like for government retirees, their health benefits that are promised to them, etc., while they live to be 98 years old after retiring at 50. That sort of thing is not even factored in. This guy was speaking about this last night. And you've got to start realizing we will quickly slide into the third world if we don't remedy these issues and remedy them quickly. And then instead of going to Nicaragua, for instance, for a mission trip, folks like Dr. Tripp will be going to Buell and Filer and Haley and places right here in Idaho. I know Haley might be a bit of a stretch there, but if it's going to happen here, it's going to happen everywhere. And I'm telling you right now, if you love this country, you have responded to that speech last night the way he intended you to respond to it. And those remarks he made about how his father, who was a builder, was more comfortable with electricians and bricklayers and plumbers. I believe Donald Trump himself, he himself has always had that same ability to communicate, despite the scads of money that the man has. And Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, and her fellow travelers, let's face it, this is about the best that they can do. We've got more on coverage from last night coming up in just a moment. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. 72 at 8:20. I referenced Dr. Jonathan Tripp a few minutes ago and his mission work. And just a note, he and his family are returning to Idaho after having gone to Nicaragua and tried to help out some of the people there who are living in abject poverty. Again, something we'd like to, by any means, avoid in the United States. He's also looking out for you when it comes to your health, and this coming Wednesday morning, we'll have one of the staff members from his office who will be joining us in studio. Could be him as well. And we'll have an opportunity to have you call in and perhaps chat with the doctor or one of his associates about some health issues. We do it every Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. It's called Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Tripp Family Medicine located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, and that's north side of the city, directly across from the main post office. Remember, life's too short not to feel good. And the doctor, of course, is also looking for new patients and can often see you on the very same day that you call the office. 736-0300. We're talking Donald Trump this morning for obvious reasons. Unless, of course, you're just returning from Mars and you've been away for a little over a year. Mr. Trump is the Republican nominee for president, surprisingly. 73, and you're up next. You're on the air on Top Story with Bill Colley.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Thanks for taking my call. I sure appreciate it. You know, that speech last night was phenomenal. I never thought I would ever say that I finally heard a speech almost as good as Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, in my eyes, is still a god. But I think Trump, with the passion he showed, with all the subjects he went over, and I dare anybody to explain to me how every subject he said that the United States is in trouble in, is not true. He hit them all. He nailed them. He came up with ways to fix things. The Hillary and her little cronies back there, like you said a little while ago, they got to be going nuts.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, they are in deep, deep trouble. How anybody could not look at Trump and say, let's give him a chance. Let's give him 4 years at least to let him prove himself wrong. But let's let him give it a shot, because I did not, but the American people voted in Obama. They gave that guy 4 years, and 4 more, and all he has done is nothing less than almost destroy this country. If Hillary gets elected, people, and they get a hold of the Supreme Court, it's over. Your gun rights, the way of life that we've loved to live is gone.
Hey, thank you much for the call, and I think it's a good point on the Second Amendment. Trump brought that up last night. We have another caller with us. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Bill, the old expression, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, is true. We saw it last night when we saw all of Trump's children. The guy in the White House had a Muslim father from Kenya, a Muslim stepfather from Indonesia. That's a truism. A apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Thank you for the call. Whoever his father happened to be. Some people say it's Frank Marshall Davis. 736-0300. You're up next, and you're on the air on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning. I think a couple of words summed it up: Americanism versus globalism. Because if you look at all the trade agreements from NAFTA on, we sent thousands and thousands of factories to China and, to Canada and Mexico before these trade agreements. Before NAFTA, we had an even trade balance with Canada and Mexico, and now it runs about 150 billion a year. I think China's right at 400 billion this last year in 2015. But Americanism versus globalism. And I think that he really hit on all cylinders last night. I thought it was a great speech. And anybody that missed it missed a really opportunity for someone to lead Congress, lead this nation back to greatness again.
Hey, thank you for the telephone call. I hear all of the critics, and they don't seem to realize, especially the elitists, that this is what the majority of the American people believe and have believed for decades. It's 8:28. We got about a minute and a half before the break. You're up next.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Yeah, I had a chance to watch the speech last night. He said, "I'm with you, America." But the part of the speech that really got to me was when his daughter was up there. He would go through newspapers, find people that were down on their luck, and have his associates find these people, bring them to his office, and he would help these people out. That part really touched me last night. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. And Rudolph Giuliani was saying the same thing. I've known the guy for 30-some years, and he said he doesn't brag about it. People say, well, he's not very Christian. He goes to a rather liberal Presbyterian USA church, and he doesn't think about where he's going to go in the afterlife and all. But on the other hand, doing charitable works and doing them quietly without saying, hey, remember that story about the Pharisees and, that they would do things in the temple so people would see them and they would strut around? Well, here you go. Donald Trump does it behind the scenes because he thinks it's the right thing to do. He doesn't do it for self-aggrandizement. And in that sense, that's a very Christian notion. And he also pledged last night that he is going to repeal the 1954 law that Lyndon Johnson placed on churches, hamstringing them from speaking on political issues, which are often very much issues of faith. 72. More on this coming up in a few minutes. It's going to dominate our discussion this morning. More of your telephone calls as well. It's 8:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com.